a professor at State University of New York, Maritime College, political analyst and lawyer. He's now joining us live from New York. Mr. Merowitz, thank you very much for making time for us and welcome to the program. Harris is playing the medical card. Trump is not privy to that and doesn't want to reveal his medical report, even despite his doctor telling him to lose weight during his presidency back in 2020, which he visibly has not. What does this medical report of a president have to do with the elections? Does it affect both of them, do you think?
It's a complete phony issue by Harris. Trump has been running around. He actually was almost assassinated, survived, runs around from place to place, from rally to rally, thousands of people in a breakneck speed that actually exceeds Harris by about 10 times. So I think that's a phony one. The real issue, to me, is how Biden is treating Harris. In connection with the terrible storm in Florida, right? Harris called DeSantis, the governor of Florida. He refused to take her call. She condemned him. And then Biden said, DeSantis is doing a great job. So something's going on here. Biden's very upset about being pushed off the ticket. And by the way, you talk about the polls. I think it's important to mention that there's something called a margin of error. In one of the polls you mentioned, I looked it up, and there is a 4-point margin of error, which means if it's 50 to 48, that really means it could be, a 52, it could be 57. The numbers really are not clearly indicative. Now, the other point is, I think one of the polls showed that Harris is receiving 6 points less, whatever that means, in Pennsylvania, in Michigan, Wisconsin, less than what Biden got in 2020. This is a very bad sign for Biden, I think, for Harris rather. And I think the key, if I can boil down the election, I think it's very, very clear. On the one hand, people are trying to find out who is Kamala Harris. She just put in this campaign as a presidential candidate literally minutes ago. And on the other side is Trump. So you basically have Harris as a relief from Biden losing the presidency and her anti-Trump policies. And then you have Trump with his well-known policies in connection with his 4 years as president. I think where the election boils down is really because the bases are there in the undecided, the small number of undecided voters are going to decide this election. And how do they decide? Well, Harris went on The View and she was asked, you were in Biden's vice president. Can you think of anything that you disagreed with Biden? Anything you would have done different? And she said, I can't think of anything. So I think people are sitting there utterly confused as to what does Harris stand for? What are her positions on immigration? She was a complete failure. On the weather, on the climate, she did nothing. Yeah,
Mr. Merowitz, we'll talk about immigration in a short while. I just want to go back to the issue that you raised there on the battleground states and what these polls are saying. We had the Wall Street Journal saying that Trump is gaining in the polls in these battleground states. What does that position mean, really? Is Trump really gaining traction in these battleground states? Are they equal in these battleground states, or what is really happening?
Well, let's focus. Take Pennsylvania. Biden's been in Pennsylvania quite a lot, and so is Harris. And Michigan, I think, the impact of the foreign policy points you talk about are not significant. Not significant. The American policy as Biden in terms of supporting Israel is rock solid. That's not going to change. And the Iranians can make press conferences till tomorrow and say that they are for peace. And everybody knows that they are the stokers of the violence and malevolence in the Middle East. They're the ones responsible for all of these problems. And frankly, Biden has backed up Israel on this 100%. And I would expect that even if Harris is president, she will do so. So I don't think This is key. By the way, the key issue in this election is jobs, economy, jobs, economy. That's it. Prices are going up at the grocery store. Prices at the gas station. Americans are not sitting there, to be candid, and thinking about, gee, I wonder what the president would do on foreign policy. Yes, it's true, we have wars raging in the world, but Americans' focus in elections, which is literally a couple of days away, is basically, why am I paying more prices? And am I going to have inflation?
Basically,
that's
the cost of living.
Absolutely, that is the
cost
key
of living.
issue.
Let me just ask you this as my final question to you, and please make it brief. How big is the immigration issue, and how are the respective campaigns faring on it? Because you said these are not some of the biggest issue, but I think we've been talking about immigration for a long time now.
No, I do agree with you, and I think the immigration issue also touches on the economy and the stability of the country, because if millions of migrants are coming in here and creating all sorts of instability, you asked me on the significance. I agree with you. I would amend what I said. I do agree immigration is important, but why is immigration important? It's important because it's indicative of Harris having been the so-called border czar in charge of this policy. Biden put her in charge. And what did she do? She never visited the border. The last time she visited the border was 2 weeks ago. She met with a few officers there, and Trump has had this issue as first #1 issue in terms of when he was president in building the wall. So I think it's important because it's on people's minds. I would also say it's probably a much bigger issue in the border states. Right. All those states like New York, where I am, are certainly affected by the migrants, but those states on the border are directly affected by it. And that issue is going to be front and center. So you do have economy, jobs, immigration. The other issues, foreign policy, and I would even argue on women's rights. Women's rights is an issue that is obviously very sensitive to many Americans and women voters.
Yeah,
the Supreme Court has ruled on it, but I don't know how the president changes that. I'm not so sure.
There are so many issues that we could talk about, but we are out of time. Thank you very much for your time. I've been talking to Mark Merowitz. He's a professor at State University of New York Maritime College, political analyst, and also a lawyer. Mr. Merowitz, again, we are out of time. Thank you for talking to us today.
It was a pleasure.
For all the latest news, download the WION app and subscribe to our YouTube channel.